This is Gemara and Yoma Daf Ayin Beis. Today's shir should be is sponsored as a special schos shidduch for Shira Miriam Abbas Rezel Gittel, the learning of the entire Chabura. As we move towards the end of Yoma, it should be a tremendous schos that she should find the shidduch haglin bekarov mirza Hashem. We should only share in good news. Of course, all achay the men b'megel chaim esar shalom sivu nezel zar bas knendeli the basim schayser yisol b'mendeli the rest of shalei shalom bas nami v'shavigu shachan shmol and tilam dem chaim rezel b'al chay bas mina liba bracha bas seven musa dinei the bashin mendas sviv ben figures very mechel so na zel whom there was the shem na zel sviv mechel Esther b'soich shar chali Yisrael as well as the shidduch v'atelia basita and Yisrael Chaim ben Devaira. We pick it up on the bottom of Ayin Aleph Amid Beis. We're 3 lines into the wide lines, and we're in the middle of a lengthy and a heated discussion about the begadim, the different strands, different threads that made up the begadim. Yesterday we began the whole Amid Beis was how we realized the tremendously thick strands, the 6, the 8, the 24, the 28 threads that were comprised each and every strand as the different begadim were created. And we're up to Rav Ashi, and Rav Ashi is going to give us another reason why, when it came to the palmoinim, the pomegranates, it couldn't have had 28 strands like the chayshon and the ephod. We concluded yesterday with Te'as and Na, which taught us that only this one, only the chayshon and the ephod was 28 strands and nothing else. Comes in Rav Ashi, and Rav Ashi says, V'asisa ksiv. It says in the Torah that you should make it she'ekol asiyois shavais, which teaches us that all the asiyois, all the makings, all the different threads, the tchilas that are going on this last shani, all have to be equal. And therefore, let's do some math, says the Gemara. Makes each one 10. 10 of tchilas and a garment and shani. Then it to be 30, not 28. Nevet trade the tisha, make 2 9s. Tisha, v'chad asara, 1 10. 9 and 10 is 28. Amar krava asisa, that doesn't work either. It says v'asisa sheikol asiyai shavis, everything has to be equal. Me'il, and therefore, says the Gemara, that's what we know, that it has to be 24, 8, 16, 24. Each one's going to be 8. And that's the reason why the Chaysh and the Ephod were the only ones that had 28, whereas the other Begadim are going to be 24. Says the Gemara, Me'il Shnei Maser, and we're continuing the Brisa that we started with at the top of the Amid, that the Me'il has 12 strands till every thread. Menolan, how do we know that the Chsiv, it says in the Torah, Basisa Samil Ephod, that you should make the Me'il, the robe of the Ephod. And says the Gemara, as we move along to today's Daf, Ayin Beis Amud Aleph, Klil Tcheles. We darshan in the pasuk, Klil, it should be braided of Tcheles. V'yol of Tcheles, Tcheles be Breiches. We learn out Tcheles from the Breiches, that we have Gzir Shava, teaching us that Malahal and Shisha, Afkan Shisha, just like by the Breiches was 6 strands to every thread, so too over here, 6 strands to every thread. And therefore, since it's braided together, 6 and 6, you can have 12 for the Me'il. Says the Gemara, V'neilav mishulav v'rimainav. Why don't we learn out from the hem and the pomegranates, and therefore show us malahal and shemaina afkan shemaina. So to here it should be 8, which therefore would be 16, because 8 braided, 8 and 8 would be 16. Answers the Gemara, done in kli mi kli. We learn out a kli from a kli, that the me'il from the pareichas being done in kli mi tachshe kli. We don't learn out from the tachshe from a decorative kli like the pomegranates and the hem, which were more decoration. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? 5 lines down, done in gufa mi gufin, done in gufa mi alma. Maybe we should learn things that go on the body, whereas the paraichas doesn't go on the body. Answers the Gemara, Hainu da'amrina l'shar begadim. This is where we learn the shar begadim shlo nemer bahem sheish. The other garments that does not say with regard to them, sheish, and therefore that's how we learn that the Me'il is going to have 8 strands per thread. Pareiches esar v'arba, and now we continue the Brisa. The Brisa says that the Pareiches has 24. Dalid tishita shita. 4 times 6, therefore is how you get to 24. Like we said yesterday, the word sheish in the pasuk, the word linen, and that's how we learn that it's going to be 4 times 6 is 24. Loi dina v'loi dayana. Says the Gemara, that's indisputable, no questions. 4 times 6, 24 for the Paraiches. Chayshin ve'ephod eser mishmaina. Now we continue. We already mentioned that the Chayshin and ephod are the only ones. V'asisa. These are the only ones that have 28. But how do we know that they have 28? Midolin dechsei v'asisa Chayshin mishpat. Maiseh Chayshev k'maiseh ephod. That the Chayshin should be a Maiseh Chayshev, like the Maisa Choshev, the work of a craftsmanship, Kemaisa Ephod, like the word of the Ephod Ta'asena, you should make it. And the pasuk continues, Zov Tcheles Vargoma Mitala Shani Vishesh Mazar, and twirl twined, Mashzar, referring to, Mashzar twine sheish of linen. Arba dishita shita. Therefore, we learn out that it's going to be 4 materials, each of 6 strands. Therefore, it's going to be 24. Esin va'arba, and that's why we have 24. Zav va'arba, so we need 28. We have another 4 of gold. Ha'esin mitmane. That's why we have the 28 strands. Says the Gemara for the Choshen and the Ephod. Asks the Gemara of Emazal Namishita. You told me it's 4 times 6 is 24, plus the 4 of gold is 28. Maybe the gold is 6, and therefore it should be 30. Amar Avachavar Yaakov Amar Krav Vikitzes B'Silim Sil. Amar Krav Vikitzes Psilim. It says in the pasuk that you cut it into pieces, into strands. Psil. If it would have just said 1 strand, then that would have said that it means 1. Psilim. By the fact that it says plural, what does that teach me? That teaches me that it's 4, and therefore 24 and 4 is going to be 28. Ravashi Amar Amar Kol La'asais B'Seicha Tcheles B'Seicha Garman. It says that you should make it into the Tcheles and into the Argaman to La Shani, and Sheish, the pasuk includes Hechi Nevid Arba Trey. Says the Gemara, you should make 4 sets of 2, braided them, and that's how you're going to have 8. Havale Tamanye. Therefore, you have 8. Says Gemara, 1 second. If you have 8, now you don't have 6. So now you're going to have an issue. Nevid Trey did Trey. So Gemara answers, Nevid Trey did Trey. Should we make 2 sets of 2 apiece? Utrei dechad chad, and 2 sets of 1 apiece? Says Mar, you can't do that either. V'asisa, like we saw before, everything has to be equal. Sheikol asiyoi shavais, everything has to be equal. Tcheles argaman ta'ah shani and the sheish, and therefore, since they all have to be equal, therefore the only way of doing it is going to be 6 times 4. It's going to be 24. You can add on another 4, and therefore you're going to have 28, including the 4 strands of gold. Amar Rechava, Amar Rav Yehuda, 3 lines before the white lines. Hamekare big dekuna loika. Now we finished discussing different threads and strands making up the big dekuna. Now we go into a bit of a random bit of sidebar dinim about the big dekuna, about the different kelim in the Beis Hamikdash as we wind down this parak. Says Rechav, the name of Rav Yehuda, if you rip one of the wrestly garments, one of the royal garments, you get malchus. How do I know? Shnemar lo yikareh. The Torah says, don't rip it. So if you rip it, you get malchus. Maskala Rav Achavar Yaakov. How do you know? This is what the Torah means. Rachmana. Navid le safa. Says the Gemara, how do you know when the Torah says lo yikareh? It means do not rip it. And if you rip it, you're over alav. Ask the Gemara, Dilma hachi kamar rachmana never le safa ki echid lo nikra. Maybe the Gemara pasuk just means make it a hem so it doesn't rip. It's like a positive commandment to ensure it doesn't rip. But if you rip it, we don't necessarily know you're over an alav. Answers the Gemara, miksiv shelo yikarei. The pasuk doesn't say so that it doesn't rip. It says lo yikarei, which teaches us that if you rip it, you get malchus. And on a similar theme, says the Gemara, if you remove the chaysh and the breastplate connected to the ephod, if you remove it, or you move the poles from the aroin, loike, you get malchus. Shenemar, the Torah says lo yaziach, but lo yasuru. It says lo yaziach, it should not detach when it talks about the chaysh from the ephod, and it says lo yasuru when it talks about removing the poles from the aroin. So if you do, you get malchus. Maskal Rav Acha bar Yaakov, the same question we had before. V'dom kikam rachmano chadkinu v'avdinu shapir kidei. Says the Gemara, maybe the Torah just means make it in a way that it doesn't fall out, that the poles don't come out. But how do you know necessarily that if you take them out, you get malchus? Answers the Gemara, Mika says, Shelo yazir v'shelo yasuru. It doesn't say so that it doesn't come out. It says, Lo yazir, lo yasuru. Teaching me that if you take it out, you get malchus. And the third Gemara, in a similar vein, comes from Rav Yisrael Chanina Rami Ksiv. Rav Yisrael Chanina asks a contradiction. It says in the rings of the aron should be the bottom, should be the poles of the aron. You should not remove them. And a different pasuk says, you should put the bottom of the poles in the rings. Says the Gemara, How do we learn these two psukim? On one hand, it says, do not remove it. On the other hand, it says, V'huva esabadim, you should put it in. What does it mean you put it in? It means you take it out and you put it back in. So that's a stiro. Did these poles come out or not? Answers the Gemara, they were loose, but they didn't come out entirely, and that's how we reconcile the two psukim. We see this in a brayso, you abadim, and the rings should be the badim yachol. You would think they should be so tight they don't move them. They should put them in. Shows me you couldn't move them. It says the Gemara, 1 second. It says you should put them. Maybe that means it comes in and out. That in the ring should be the badim al ketan misparkim in ishmatim. They were loose, but they do not come fully out, and those are the poles that they're able to be moved a bit, but they never come fully out. And where do we see this in the pasuk? Says the Gemara, Atzei shitim oimdim. Says the Gemara. Excuse me, I skipped. Amar Rav Chama bar Rav Chanina. So again, so the Gemara just answered that the poles move, but they don't come out. Amar Rav Chama bar Rav Chanina, 4 lines from the bottom. What is the meaning of the pasuk? Say shitim oimdim. Continuing this theme, darshaning different psukim about the kelim and the different begadim. What is the meaning of the pasuk? Atzei shitim oimdim. That has to be made, that all the beams, all the different pieces of the Mishkan should be made of atzei shitim wood. All oimdim which are standing. She oimdim derech dilasan. They have to go the way that they grow upright. Avaracher oimdim shamamidin eseipuyan. That they support the gold plating, they support the gold that was on it. What do we learn out for the word oimdim, standing? Maybe you're going to say, we don't have a Mishkan anymore. So maybe you're going to tell me, Ava Tzivron, they no longer have their promise, Batal Sikuyan. We no longer have any hope. That it's going to be standing forever and ever, which the Marshal learns over here means that the beams themselves are still intact. They never will rot. Rav Chama bar Rav Chanina Maidach Sev. He darshins. What's the meaning of the pasuk in the last line? It's big day asara the sheirs by kodesh. The big day surad to serve in the kodesh. Now, generally, big day means the parts that covered over the kelim when they traveled. Here, the Gemara darshins that it means a little bit differently as we turn over to Ayin Beis and Mid Beis. Ilmali big day kuna lo nishtayim mitzaneim shel Yisrael sredu palit. Why are they called big day surad? Because the begadim of the Kohen Gadol kept Klal Yisrael alive. Of course, when the Gemara says Misayneim Shel Yisrael, it's euphemistic referring to Klal Yisrael itself, that the big day kuna is that which gives us the schos to survive in Galus. Rav Shema bar Nachmani Amar Tvei Rav Shimon Tana Begadim Shegar Din Isaac Kibriyasan Mikileim. Says the Gemara, it teaches me their begadim shegarden asam kibriyasan bikileim that are cut from their kibriyasan as they're made from their instruments of creation, meaning the loom, mikileim in their required shape. Umesadrim mehem klum, and when they cut off, some part is left over. So what's going on? On one hand, it's created full, and the moment you remove it from the loom, it's already entity. On the other hand, there's something left over. Says the Gemara 5 lines down. That's the Maisa Machat, the needlework, the sewing, that which is what's left over, which we'll see in a moment means like the arms are going to be sewed on to the body of the beged, but the full roiv, the full majority of the beged of the big day kuna are complete. Meisvei, ask the Gemara, big day kuna, says more 1 second. The Brisa says the big day kuna was not made with Maisa Machat. There was no needlework at all. It was only Maisa Oirig. It was all woven. So why did you just teach me a moment ago that there was some Maisa Machat? Shenamar Maisa Oirig. Like we just explained, the sleeves were made with Maisa Machat, and then they were attached to the larger part of the garment. Big day kuna na'regis with ne'atzma, v'ne'vegdes imabeged, then it was attached. Oh my God, had pieces of yan and went down all the way to the palm of the kohen's hand, a little bit of along the robe with the sleeves. There were 3 aroinos. Arainis, then if it's telling me, it doesn't mean 3 Arainis. It means 3 boxes. And so the middle one was wool, Tisho of 9 Tfachim. Penimi Shal Zav, they said it was gold, Shemaina 8 Tfachim, B'chitza, and Asara was 10 Tfachim, Mashu in a little bit. Yes, the Gemara about Tanya, Echad Asara, Mashu. We learned that the outside box of the Arin was 11 Tfachim and a little bit. Like Hashabi, Command Damar Yishav of Tefach, like Command Damar Ein Ba'avi of Tefach. Do you hold that the thickness on the bottom was a Tefach? Then it's going to be that plus 10. Then it will be 11 Tefachim on the outside box. If not, it will only be 10 and a little bit. Umay Mashu, says the Gemara. And what is the little bit that's left over? Zer. That is the crown that went around the Aroin. And once we mentioned the crown, there were 3 crowns on the kilim of the Beis HaMikdash. Of Shal Mizbeach, Shal Aroin, Shal Shulchan. And now we explain. Shal Mizbeach, the crown of the Mizbeach, Zacha Aroin V'Natzla. It went to Aaron HaKohen. Shal Shulchan, Zavadav V'Natzla. Shal Aroin, Adayim Unachu. The crown of the Aroin is standing. Of course, the Aroin symbolizing Torah. Anyone who wants to come and take the Torah could come and take it, symbolized by the fact that the crown of the Aroin, that golden strip around, was not taken by anyone. Maybe you'll tell me, says the Gemara, maybe you'll tell me this crown, the crown of the Aroin, is Pachais, it's more inferior, it's lower than the rest of the crowns. That through me the kings will reign. It's the crown of Melucha, the Keser Torah, and that is left to any person that wants to grab hold of it. Rav Yechon and Rami Ksiv Zer Bekrinan Zer says Rav Yechon 1 second. It says Zer without a vav, but we need Zer with a vav. You know what this teaches me? Zacha, Naslei Zer, Lai Zacha, Zara Imenu. If you're Zaycha to merit to learn the Torah, then it becomes a crown. If not, it becomes Zara, estranged from you. Rav Yechon and Rami similarly Ksiv Azizcha Aron hates. Says you should make the Aron Ksiv As Aron Asay Shitim. Mikan the Talmid Chacham Shabnei Iloi Mitzuyin Lasai Sloi Melachtai. This teaches me that the town of a Talmid Chacham, they perform the work from him, because on one hand the pasuk sounds like he has to do work, the other hand it says Talmid Chacham should not do work. Explains Rav Yechanan that the people in the town are the ones that fulfill the work for him. From inside and outside, Aaron is covered with gold. If your inside is not like your outside, gotta wear your heart in your sleeve. You can't just be external. People think you're a holy person, but inside you're a terrible, dreadful person. No, you're teichai kebara. Your inside has to be like the outside. Niktev. If he's called a nitev, someone who's loathsome, someone who's just a lowly person, as the pasuk says, it's going to be someone who's lowly and tainted, one who drinks from the water. Of course, the mayim referring to Torah, someone whose inside is not like his outside. Kemayim avla, like the water of iniquity. What is the meaning of the pasuk? What is the reason why there's money in the hand of the fool? To purchase wisdom, and he doesn't have a heart. Explains the Gemara, woe is to the enemies, of course referring to Talmidei Chacham themselves. They learn Torah, but they don't have Yireh Shamayim. And that's a terrible thing. And Machas Rav Yanai screamed out and he said, Chaval! Wow, the less lay darta vitari le darta avid. He doesn't have a courtyard, and yet he makes a gate for the courtyard. He doesn't even have the Torah, meaning he has the Torah, but he doesn't have the Yiras Shamayim. He has nothing. Amar le Rav le Rabban, Rav said to Rabban b'matusa minaychu. I beg of you, like tirtin tarti ganim, do not get Ganim 2 times. And the Mefarshim here explain what's the reason is that you think like you're learning Torah, so you're depriving yourself, but you don't have Yireh Shamayim, so you don't have Olam Hazeh, you don't have Olam Haba, you have nothing. Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi, 2 lines before them, white lines. What is the meaning of the pasuk? The Torah has qualities that can heal or qualities that can kill. If you're good with it, if you're skillful with the Torah, it becomes the elixir of life. If not, it becomes the elixir of death. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani Rav Yonasan Rami Ksiv. It says in the first white line, Bekudi Hashem Yishar Misam Chelev. So many famous psukim. The Bekudim of Hashem, the orders of Hashem are Yashar, upright. Misam Chelev, they glad in the heart. To Ksiv, and a different pasuk says, Amarti Hashem Serufa. The pasuk says, the word of Hashem smelts, it melts. Sounds like it destroys. So the Gemara says, Zacha Misam Chasli. If your Zayich LeTorah will gladden you, Laizacha Sarfasa, it's going to destroy you. Rish Lakish Amar Megufet Dekra, we see this from the pasuk itself, Nafka. Zacha Sarfasa L'Chayim, Zacha Sarfasa L'Mitza. Sarfasa is like it melts it down. It can either melt you for good or melt you for bad. Years Hashem Ta'ira met this law. It says the pasuk, the fear of Hashem is pure, it lasts forever. Amar Rav Chanina Zeh Ta'ira. Mahi, what does that mean? You get married, so you don't have any impure thoughts. Eidos Hashem Ne'amana says the pasuk that Eidos Hashem, the testimony of Hashem is Ne'amana, is trustworthy. It gives Eidos on its wolves that learn it. And we conclude back into the Mishkan that it's the work of the embroidery, but as well it says it's the work of a designer. Which one is it? Says Rav Elazar, they first would embroider it and then they would mark it. It had both elements, the Maisa Oyreg and Maisa Chayshiv, and that's why from one side you only saw one face, on the other side of the Berachos you saw two faces. We'll pick it up from here tomorrow as we'll conclude the Perek.